The flower you walk past a day without a second glance has been perfecting its design for 130 million years. It knows exactly what it is doing. And tonight, for the first time, so will you. Hello there and welcome to the Sleepy Science Facts channel. Tonight we will be drifting into the world of flowers. Not simply the ones in a vase on a table or the ones that line the path through a garden, but the whole of it, the full, ancient, and deeply surprising science of the most successful reproductive strategy the plant kingdom has ever produced. Flowers changed the world. Before they existed, the land was dominated by conifers, ferns, and cycads, a green world of wind-pollinated plants that reproduced by scattering pollen on the hope that some of it would find its way to the right destination. Then, approximately 130 million years ago, something new appeared. A plant produced a structure so precisely designed to attract, reward, and deceive animals into carrying its pollen directly from one individual to another that the entire trajectory of life on land changed. Within tens of millions of years, flowering plants had diversified from a handful of species into over 350,000, making them the most species-rich group of plants on Earth by an enormous margin. They reshaped the diets and bodies of insects, birds, and mammals. They produced the fruits and seeds that feed almost every terrestrial animal, including every human being alive. They invented colors, scents, shapes, and timings of extraordinary precision and variety. And they did all of this without a brain, without movement, and without any awareness of what they were producing. Flowers are the result of the blind watchmaker of natural selection working at its finest, and the closer you look, the more extraordinary the design becomes. From the orchid that mimics a female insect so convincingly that male insects attempt to mate with it, to the corpse flower that heats itself to the temperature of a mammal to spread its scent of rotting flesh across a kilometer of rainforest, flowers reward curiosity with something genuinely astonishing at every scale. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. Let your body soften and allow your breathing to slow and allow the day to gently fade away as we explore the mysteries of flowers together. Let's begin. The flower is, at its most fundamental level, a reproductive structure, and every single feature it possesses, every petal, every color, every scent, every droplet of nectar, exists for one purpose and one purpose only: to move pollen from one individual plant to another of the same species, as efficiently and as reliably as possible. This purpose, so simple when stated plainly, has driven one of the most spectacular explosions of diversity in the history of life. The 350,000 or more species of flowering plants alive today have each evolved a slightly different solution to the same problem, and the solutions they have arrived at range from the sublimely simple to the almost inconceivably elaborate. A grass flower is tiny, colorless, and unscented because grasses are wind-pollinated and have no need to attract an animal visitor. A night-blooming jasmine is white and intensely fragrant because it is pollinated by moths that fly after dark and navigate by smell rather than color. A red tubular flower in the American tropics is pollinated by hummingbirds, which have excellent red color vision and long bills suited to probing tubular structures for nectar. A blue flower in a European meadow is pollinated by bees, which see ultraviolet light and follow patterns on petals invisible to human eyes that guide them to the nectary at the flower's center. Every feature of every flower is a message directed at a specific recipient, and the message has been refined by millions of years of selection to be as clear, as compelling, and as honest or as deceptive as the plant's evolutionary strategy requires. The flower is not decoration. It is communication, written in color and scent and shape, addressed to an audience of insects and birds and bats and wind. Flowers existed before bees. This is one of the most important and least appreciated facts in the history of life, because it reframes a relationship between flowers and their pollinators in a way that changes everything. The earliest flowering plants appeared in the fossil record approximately 130 million years ago, and the insects that pollinated them were not bees, which had not yet evolved, but beetles, flies, and wasps. Bees themselves evolved from wasps approximately 120 to 130 million years ago, in a lineage that shifted from predating on other insects to feeding on pollen and nectar, and the extraordinary diversity of bees, over 20,000 species alive today, developed in close coevolutionary dialogue with flowering plants over the subsequent 100 million years. This means a relationship between bees and flowers is a co-evolutionary story of approximately equal length on both sides, each group shaping the other simultaneously. The long tongues of certain bees match the depth of certain flowers with precision that looks designed, because in a very real sense it is shaped by natural selection on both sides and a mutual refinement that has been ongoing for 100 million years. Before bees, before butterflies, before hummingbirds, there were flowers, and the insect that visited them were generalists, not specialists. The specialization came later, driven by the mutual advantages of reliable, targeted delivery of pollen on the flower's side and reliable, concentrated nutritional reward on the pollinator side. The flower came first. The world of pollinators we know today grew up around it. Stay close. What comes next is something that most people walk past every day of their lives without knowing, and it is one of the most extraordinary things in all of the natural world. Flowers can see you, not with eyes, and not with anything that resembles vision as we experience it, but through a sensitivity to light that operates at a cellular level and produces responses that are, in functional terms, a form of seeing. The petals of many flowers contain cells shaped like tiny lenses that focus light onto pigment-containing cells beneath them, producing the vivid, saturated colors that attract pollinators. Some flowers track the sun across the sky throughout the day through a process called solar tracking or heliotropism, their petals and flower heads rotating to face the sun from morning to evening. Arctic poppies do this with particular precision, their cup-shaped flowers acting as parabolic reflectors that concentrate solar heat at their center, raising the temperature inside the flower by several degrees above the ambient air. This warmth attracts insects seeking heat on cold Arctic mornings, and the insects, while warming themselves, pollinate the flower. The plant is not simply passively absorbing sunlight. It is actively managing its light environment, concentrating heat, creating a microclimate, and using that microclimate as an attractant, all in a structure that has no nervous system, no muscles in conventional sense, and no awareness of what it is doing. The responsiveness of flowers to light extends to their opening and closing. Many flowers open in the morning and close at night, a behavior called nyctinaccy, regulated by light sensors in the cells of the petals. Some close in response to cloud cover. Some open only at night, when their moth pollinators are active. The flower does not simply exist in its environment. It monitors it and responds to it in ways that serve its reproductive purpose with precision that took science centuries to begin to understand. The scent of a flower is one of the most complex chemical productions in the biological world, and the information it carries is far richer than the simple signal of presence that most people assume it to be. Floral scents are blends of dozens to hundreds of volatile organic compounds, produced in specialized cells within the petals and other floral parts, and released into the air in quantities and proportions that change with the time of day, the temperature, the stage of development of the flower, and whether or not the flower has already been pollinated. A freshly opened flower produces a different scent blend from a flower that opened yesterday. A flower that has already received pollen and no longer needs a pollinator visit reduces or changes its scent production, effectively switching off the advertisement once the sale is made. The complexity of the blend is not accidental. Different components of the scent blend carry different information. Some components attract pollinators from a distance. Others guide them to land on the correct part of the flower once they are close. Still others repel non-pollinating visitors that would consume nectar without transferring pollen. And some flowers produce scents that mimic the alarm pheromones of aphids, attracting the parasitic wasps that hunt aphids and that, while searching the flower for prey that is not there, inadvertently carry out pollination. The scent of a flower is not perfume. It is a precisely formulated chemical message with multiple components addressed to multiple recipients, capable of changing its content in real time in response to conditions, produced by a plant that has no brain and no nose. The color patterns visible on flowers under ultraviolet light, invisible to human eyes but clearly visible to bees and many other pollinators, reveal a hidden architecture of guidance and instruction that completely transforms our understanding of what a flower looks like. To a human eye, a field of yellow buttercups looks uniform, each flower the same plain yellow. To a bee's eye, sensitive to ultraviolet as well as visible light, each buttercup has a dark center created by ultraviolet-absorbing pigments in the inner petals, surrounded by a bright ultraviolet reflecting outer ring. The dark center, invisible to us, acts as a landing guide, directing the bee toward the nectary and the pollen-bearing structures at the heart of the flower. This pattern, called a nectar guide, is found in the majority of bee-pollinated flowers and has been photographed using ultraviolet sensitive cameras, revealing a hidden visual world that the flower has been displaying to its pollinators for tens of millions of years without any human observer being able to see it. Some flowers have ultraviolet patterns that change after pollination, switching off the nectar guide signal once the flower no longer requires a pollinator visit, and redirecting pollinators to flowers still waiting to be visited. The flower is not just signaling. It is managing the flow of pollinator traffic across the plant population with a dynamic signaling system that updates in real time, all without any central control, driven purely by the chemistry of individual flowers responding to their own reproductive state. Let your breathing slow now. Let the images of flowers settle gently behind your eyes, their colors dimming as the room grows quieter. There is no need to hold on to anything. Just let it all drift. Orchids are the most diverse family of flowering plants on Earth, with over 28,000 described species, and the strategies they use to attract pollinators range from honest reward to elaborate deception of a sophistication that has no parallel anywhere else in the plant kingdom. The majority of orchid species produce no nectar at all. They attract pollinators through false advertising, mimicking the appearance, scent, or texture of something the pollinator wants but cannot obtain from the flower. The most extraordinary example of this is sexual deception, practiced by several hundred orchid species that produce flowers bearing precise resemblance in shape, color, texture, and chemical scent to the body of a female insect of a specific species. Male insects attempt to mate with the flower, and in the process of doing so, they pick up or deposit pollen masses called pollinia that are attached to specific parts of their body in positions that match the position of the receptive stigma on the next flower they visit. The precision of the mimicry is extraordinary. The scent compound blend produced by these orchids match the sex pheromones of the targeted insect species closely enough to be detected and responded to by the male insect as if they were produced by a real female. Some orchid species are so specific in their mimicry that they are pollinated by a single species of insect, and if that species disappears from the area, the orchid cannot reproduce. The orchid has evolved its entire reproductive strategy around deceiving one specific insect, and the deception works so well that it has been maintained and refined for millions of years, sustained by natural selection because a deceived insect is fooled often enough to make the strategy viable even though it offers no reward, and the insect that visit once presumably learned to avoid the flower in future. The fastest plant movement ever recorded belongs to a flower, and the mechanism behind it has been studied by physicists as well as botanists. The white mulberry tree produces stamens that are bent inward under tension during bud development, held in a cocked position by the mechanical properties of the developing tissue. When the flower opens and the stamen is released, it straightens with explosive speed, launching pollen into the air at accelerations exceeding 800 times the acceleration due to gravity and tip velocities exceeding half the speed of sound. The entire release takes less than 25 microseconds, making it the fastest known movement of any plant structure and one of the fastest biological movements ever measured. The pollen is launched as a cloud that disperses into the astrum above the flower, where it can be carried by wind to other flowers. The mulberry is wind-pollinated, and the explosive release maximizes the quantity of pollen delivered to the astrum in a single, brief burst rather than the slow release of individually shedding grains. Other flowers use explosive mechanisms for different purposes. The touch-me-not, impatiens, builds hydraulic pressure in its seed pods and releases it when touched, flinging seeds up to several meters. The squirting cucumber detaches from its stem under internal pressure and ejects its seeds in a jet of liquid that can reach up to 10 meters. The flower, so often perceived as a passive, static object waiting to be visited, is in many species capable of movements of remarkable speed and force driven by physics and chemistry rather than muscles, but no less impressive for that. The corpse flower is the most dramatic example of a flower that attracts pollinators through deception, and the performance it puts on to do so involves a biochemical feat that few other plants can match. Amorphophilus titanum, the titanarum, produces the largest and branched inflorescence of any plant in the world, reaching heights of over 3 meters, and it achieves its pollination through a combination of spectacular visual display and precisely timed temperature regulation that has no close equivalent in the plant kingdom. The flower produces a powerful scent of rotting flesh and feces, created by a blend of volatile compounds including dimethyl trisulfide and other sulfur-containing molecules that are also produced by decaying animal matter. This scent attracts carrion beetles, and blowflies are searching for rotting meat in which to lay their eggs. But the corpse flower does more than simply produce an offensive scent. It heats the central spike of the inflorescence, called the spadix, to a temperature of approximately 36 degrees Celsius, similar to the core body temperature of a mammal, by burning stores of starch at a rate comparable to a small mammal's metabolism. This heat volatilizes the scent compounds more effectively, spreading them across a wider area and making the flower detectable from a greater distance. The insects that enter the flower find no food and no suitable egg-laying site. They pick up pollen and depart, carrying it to the next corpse flower they are fooled by. The entire performance lasts only about 48 hours, after which the inflorescence collapses and the plant retreats back into dormancy, sometimes for years, before producing another flower. The relationship between fig trees and fig wasps is one of the oldest and most precisely co-evolved relationships in the natural world, and without it, the fig as we know it could not exist. Every species of fig tree is pollinated by one or a very small number of species of fig wasp, and the wasps are entirely dependent on the fig for reproduction. A female fig wasp, carrying pollen from the fig she was born inside, enters a fig through a tiny opening called the ostiole, often losing her wings and antennae in the process. Inside the fig, which is not a fruit but an enclosed inflorescence containing hundreds of tiny flowers, she pollinates the flowers as she lays her eggs inside some of them. She then dies inside the figure. Her offspring hatch. The wingless males mate with the females before chewing exit tunnels through the fig wall, and the females collect pollen from the male flowers before emerging to find a new fig to enter. The relationship has persisted for approximately 90 million years. The figs and their wasps have co-evolved in such close partnership that the fig's internal flower structure matches the body dimensions of its specific wasp pollinator, and the wasp behavior is precisely calibrated to the flower's architecture. Figs are foundational species in tropical forests, producing fruit year-round rather than seasonally and providing food for an enormous range of animals when other fruit sources are scarce. Without the wasps, the figs cannot reproduce. Without the figs, the wasps have nowhere to lay their eggs. The entire ecological richness that figs support across tropical forests rests on a mutualism 90 million years old, involving an insect smaller than a grain of rice. Here is something to carry with you into sleep tonight. Every fruit you have ever eaten began as a flower. The apple was a flower for weeks before it was an apple. The strawberry was a cluster of tiny white flowers before it was a strawberry. The tomato, the pepper, the cucumber, the mango, the grape, and every other fruit in the world began as a reproductive structure designed to attract a pollinator, and became a fruit only after that pollinator succeeded. The sweetness of the fruit is not for you. It evolved to attract the birds and mammals that would eat it and carry the seeds inside it to a new location, depositing them in their droppings far from the parent plant. You are, from the flower perspective, simply a large and effective seed disperser, and the pleasure you take in eating fruit is a reward the plant evolved to ensure that you would cooperate. Now let the weight of your body settle completely into the surface beneath you. Let your arms go soft. Let your legs go still. The garden outside, if there's one, is breathing slowly in the dark, every flower closed for the night, every petal holding its color and its scent in reserve for the morning. You can do the same. Hold everything in reserve. Nothing is needed tonight except rest. The rose has been cultivated by humans for at least 5,000 years, and the history of its cultivation is one of the most revealing stories about the relationship between human aesthetics and plant biology. Wild roses typically have 5 petals arranged around a central mass of pollen-producing stamens, and this simple, functional form has been so thoroughly modified by centuries of selective breeding that many cultivated rose varieties have lost the stamens entirely, their reproductive structures converted by genetic selection into additional petals that make the flower more visually spectacular to human eyes. These double roses, which can have dozens or hundreds of petals, are unable to reproduce naturally because they have no functioning stamens or their floral architecture prevents pollinators from reaching the reproductive structures. The extravagant beauty we have bred into the rose has been produced at the cost of the rose's function, and the flowers that inspire poetry, symbolize love, and fill the cut flower trade are, in a biological sense, broken, unable to do the thing that flowers exist to do. The wild rose, with its 5 petals and its visible yellow stamens, is functionally a more perfect flower. We have selected for the form that pleases us and discarded the function that drives the plant's entire existence. The history of the cultivated rose is, in this way, a parable about the relationship between human preference and the logic of the natural world. We have made it more beautiful to our eyes and less capable of being anything other than what we want it to be. Flowers measure time with a precision that Carl Linnaeus, the Swedish botanist who invented the modern system of biological naming, was the first to document formally in the 18th century. Linnaeus observed that different species of flowers open and close at predictable times of day and proposed planting a floral clock, a garden in which the sequence of flowers opening through the day would tell the time to a gardener who knew their habits. Certain species of hawkweed open at 6 in the morning. Dandelions open at 5 to 8 in the morning depending on season. White water lilies open at 7. Scarlet pimpernel opens at 8 and closes at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Evening primrose opens at 6 in the evening. Moonflower opens at night. The precise timing of flower opening is regulated by the plant's internal circadian clock, the same type of biological timekeeping system found in virtually all living things, interacting with light and temperature signals from the environment. For pollinators, this temporal spacing is significant. A bee that learns a particular flower opens at a particular time and is reliably at its most rewarding for a window of a few hours around that time can become a specialist visitor for that flower, arriving at the optimal moment and concentrating its visits where the reward is greatest. The flower's schedule and the pollinator's schedule co-evolve toward the same time, and the result is a relationship of almost clockwork regularity operating in the background of the visible world, driven by the same physics of light and chemistry that runs every biological clock. The vanilla orchid is the source of one of the most widely used flavorings in the world, and the story of its pollination reveals how fragile connections between flowers and their pollinators can be. Vanilla planifolia is native to Mexico and Central America, and in its native range it is pollinated by a specific genus of bee and occasionally by certain hummingbirds. When the Spanish brought vanilla to Europe in the 16th century, the plant could be grown successfully but produced no pods because its pollinators were not present. For centuries, vanilla was an extraordinarily expensive flavoring produced almost entirely in Mexico, where the native pollinators were available. In the 19th century, a 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmund Albius on the island of Reunion discovered that vanilla flower could be hand-pollinated by transferring pollen from the stamen to the stigma using a small stick, a technique that could be performed in the brief window during which each flower is receptive, typically only a few hours. This technique, still used in vanilla production today on the islands of Madagascar, Réunion, and Tahiti that together produce the majority of the world's vanilla, requires individual workers to hand-pollinate thousands of flowers every day during the brief flowering season. Every vanilla pod in the world, every bottle of vanilla extract, every vanilla-flavored food that has ever been produced outside of Mexico is a product of hand labor substituting for a bee that is not there. The connection between a flower and its pollinator, once severed by geography, becomes a human labor problem of enormous scale. The lotus flower has held a special place in human culture across Asia for thousands of years, considered sacred in Hinduism and Buddhism, and associated with purity, enlightenment, and the capacity to rise above difficulty. The botanical reality of the lotus is no less extraordinary than the symbolism attached to it. The lotus grows with its roots in the mud at the bottom of ponds and rivers, and its flowers rising above the surface of the water, and its petals possess a property called superhydrophobicity that causes water to beat into perfect spheres and roll off the surface, taking any dirt or contamination with it. This property, called the lotus effect, has inspired the development of self-cleaning surfaces in materials science, from building facades that stay clean in rain to fabrics that repel liquids and soils without chemical treatment. The lotus also regulates the temperature of its flowers with a precision that rivals warm-blooded animals. During the day, the lotus flower maintains a temperature of approximately 30 to 35 degrees Celsius regardless of the ambient air temperature, using the metabolism of cells within the flower to generate heat. This thermogenesis attracts beetles that come to warm themselves in the flower, and in the process of warming themselves they carry pollen from flower to flower. The lotus that has been venerated as a symbol of purity and transcendence for 3,000 years turns out to be a self-cleaning, thermogenic, warm-blooded flower. And the science is, if anything, more impressive than the symbolism. The night-blooming flowers are their own world, a parallel universe of pollination that operates in the hours when most people are asleep, served by a different community of pollinators and using a different set of signals. Night-blooming flowers are typically white or pale in color, because color is largely invisible in darkness and white reflects the maximum available moonlight, making the flower as visible as possible to pollinators navigating by low light. They produce their most intense scents after dark, when moth and bat pollinators are active, and in many species the scent production increases dramatically at sunset and peaks in the hours around midnight. The night-blooming jasmine, the moonflower, the evening primrose, the sacred datura, and the night-blooming water lily all operate on this nocturnal schedule, coordinated with the activity patterns of the moths and in some cases the bats that pollinate them. Hawk moths, the primary pollinators of many night-blooming flowers, have the longest tongues of any insect relative to their body size, capable of reaching nectar stored in the deep tubes of flowers too long for any daytime pollinator to access. The orchid Angraecum sesquipedale of Madagascar has a nectar spur 30 centimeters long, and Darwin, examining it in the 19th century before its pollinator was known, predicted that there must exist a moth with tongue 30 centimeters long to pollinate it. He was ridiculed for the prediction. 21 years after his death, a hawk moth with a tongue of precisely that length was discovered in Madagascar and named Xanthopan morganii predictor, the predicted one, in honor of his reasoning. The night flowers and their pollinators are living proof that evolution and prediction can align if you understand the logic well enough. Let the dark settle completely around you now. You have been traveling for a long time and have come a long way from where the evening began. The flowers outside are all closed. The night pollinators are doing their quiet work in the dark. Everything is on its own schedule, and yours is this: simply breathing, simply resting. There is nothing more that needs to happen tonight. Flowers evolve color through the same basic chemistry as sunsets, autumn leaves, and the pigments in human skin, and the range of color they produce reflects both the physics of pigment molecules and the sensory systems of their target pollinators. The red, orange, and yellow pigments in flowers are primarily produced by compounds called carotenoids and anthocyanins. Blue and purple pigments are produced almost exclusively by anthocyanins, and the specific color produced depends on the pH of the cell in which the anthocyanin is dissolved, with more acidic conditions producing redder tones and more alkaline conditions producing blue ones. White flowers contain no pigments in their petals, reflecting all wavelengths equally. Black flowers are extremely rare in nature because no pigment produces true black in a flower petal. The few flowers that appear black to human eyes, such as certain dark tulips and irises, are actually extremely deep purple or maroon, absorbing most visible wavelengths while reflecting a small amount in the deep red. The color of a flower is not fixed. It can change over the course of a single day in response to changes in cell pH as the flower ages, and in some species a color change is a deliberate signal, indicating to pollinators that the flower has already been visited and is no longer redirecting traffic to newer flowers. Lantana, a common garden plant, changes its individual flower color from yellow to orange to red as it ages, and bees preferentially visit the yellow flowers, which are reliably more rewarding. The color change is a flower's way of managing its relationship with its pollinator without a single word being spoken or understood by either party. The mathematics of the flower has fascinated scientists and artists alike for centuries, and the numerical patterns found in flowers are among the most elegant examples of mathematical structure in nature. The number of petals on many flowers follows the Fibonacci sequence, a series of numbers in which each number is the sum of the two preceding ones, beginning 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on. Most lilies have 3 petals. Buttercups have 5. Delphiniums have 8. Many daisies have 13 outer petals. Some have 21 or 34. The spirals and the seed heads of sunflowers and the scales of pine cones are arranged in Fibonacci numbers, with a number of clockwise spirals and anticlockwise spirals being adjacent numbers in the Fibonacci sequence. This pattern arises not from any mystical property of the number sequence, but from the mathematics of optimal packing. When a growing tip produces new elements, leaves, petals, or seeds, at a constant angle of approximately 137.5 degrees relative to the previous one, called a golden angle, the resulting spiral arrangement produces the most efficient packing of elements in the available space. The Fibonacci numbers emerge as a consequence of this geometry rather than being programmed indirectly. The flower is solving an optimization problem in the geometry of growth, and the solution it converges on is the same mathematical sequence that appears in rabbit breeding problems, in the worlds of galaxies, and in the proportions of the human hand. Mathematics does not belong to mathematics. It belongs to the logic of growth itself. The most ancient flowering plant lineages alive today are living bridges between the world before flowers and the world the flower created, and studying them reveals the early steps of one of the most important evolutionary transitions in the history of life. Amberella trichopoda, a small shrub found only on the island of New Caledonia in the Pacific Ocean, is considered the most basal living flowering plant, meaning it diverged earliest from the main lineage and has changed least from the common ancestor of all flowering plants. It has simple, small flowers with no clear distinction between petals and sepals and no nectar. Water lilies, also among the earliest diverging lineages, have flowers that show the transition between simple and complex floral organization. Magnolias, another ancient lineage, produce flowers pollinated by beetles, which are among the oldest flower visitors, with a floral architecture more like a primitive cone than a modern flower. These living relics of the earliest flowering plants are windows into a world 130 million years ago when the flower was just beginning its extraordinary diversification, and they show that the starting point was simple, modest, and unannounced, nothing in its first appearances to suggest that the lineage would eventually produce orchids, sunflowers, roses, and the 350,000 species of flowering plant that would come to dominate the land surface of the earth. Every spectacular flower in every garden and every wild meadow on earth descends from something modest and ancient, a beginning so quiet that no observer at the time could have known what was starting. And so we drift gently back from the world of flowers, carrying with us the quiet wonder of everything we have visited tonight. We followed a scent signal composed of hundreds of volatile molecules from a flower that has been refining it for millions of years, and found it designed with precision that no human perfumer has ever achieved. We looked at a flower through a bee's eyes and found a landing guide painted in ultraviolet, invisible to us but as clear as a runway to the insect for whom it was made. We watched an orchid impersonate a female insect with a chemical precision so accurate that male insects are reliably deceived, and found a corpse flower heating itself to body temperature to spread the smell of death across a kilometer of rainforest. We found the mathematics of the Fibonacci sequence written in the spiral of every sunflower, not as a design but as the inevitable result of optimal packing. We tasted the vanilla in our memory and found a 12-year-old boy on a tropical island, and the brief window of a flower's receptivity behind the flavor. We found the lotus self-cleaning and warm-blooded and sacred and scientifically extraordinary all at once, and found the night flowers opening after we close our eyes, serving a world of pollinators we never see. The flower did not set out to be beautiful. Beauty was what happened when a reproductive structure was shaped by 100 million years of selection pressure from eyes that responded to color, noses that responded to scent, and mouths that responded to sweetness. The beauty of flowers is the beauty of a long conversation between plants and animals, written in color and scent and shape, still going on tonight in every garden and forest and meadow on earth, in the dark, quietly, exactly as it has always done. You have been part of that world all your life, walking through it every day, breathing its scents, eating its fruits, watching its colors change with the seasons. Tonight, for a little while, you understood a little more of what it was saying. If you enjoyed this sleepy journey, you could support the channel by liking, subscribing, or leaving a calm little comment before you rest. It helps more curious minds find their way here. And if you are still awake, there's another video waiting on your screen, ready to carry you onward into another corner of science. But for now, let the questions loosen their grip. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. Allow your breathing to slow, steady, and deepen. Picture a garden at night, every flower closed, every petal holding its color in the dark, waiting quietly for the light that will open them again in a few hours. The scent is still there, drifting gently on the air, designed for a moth that may be passing right now in the darkness. Everything is patient. Everything is waiting. You are part of that patience tonight, breathing slowly in the dark, holding everything you are in reserve until the morning. Sleep well, and good night.